Hello, everyone. We are here at Indie Novella today interviewing one of our newest authors, Alex Wolff. So we're with Alex today and we're going to be chatting all about his newest novel. So hello, Alex.
Hello there.
Hello. Very nice to meet you, albeit online. So you've written a great novel. Could you briefly explain to a potential reader what it is about?
Sure, it's about a sort of stressed out suburban character called Ben Rose, who he's a single father. His wife disappeared about 8 months before the story begins, and he's sort of getting slightly stressed and sort of paranoid about stuff that's sort of happening around him. For example, he starts hearing strange noises in his basement, and then when he goes through his local park, he sees a young girl who's sort of well dressed but doesn't appear to have any parents, and she seems to live in a derelict house, and that sort of bothers him. And then his daughter Imogen, who he calls Midge, she starts finding or receiving messages from someone purporting to be her mother. So and then of course there's this sort of rather sort of terrifying entity called Mr. Jones, who haunts the imaginations of the local school children, a kind of boogeyman character who one girl claims once attacked her. And so all these things start building up in Ben's mind, and he starts to think that someone is out to kidnap his daughter. And that really sets the scene for the novel. And it's really about the main question, I guess it seeks to ask is, how much of this is real and how much of this is his imagination and paranoia. And at some point he teams up with a woman called Amy, who has also had a sort of personal tragedy in her life. She lost her daughter sometime before the novel begins. And so they've kind of got similar states of mind in a way, and it's really also about the tension, romantic possibly, but also other forms of tension that exist potentially. Slightly long-winded example of what it's about. Yeah.
No, you sold it well. It really sounds amazing. Lots of different aspects coming in there of sort of the psychological elements. It sounds great. So could you tell us a little bit more about where the idea or ideas for your book came from?
Sure. Well, it all began about 6 years ago when my own daughter was about the same age as Imogen. And we were walking through my local park on our way to school one very hot day, and I noticed how everything was overgrown and it had all gone to seed. And I have a kind of weird fear of nature when nature runs wild, and I've always had it, and it kind of creeps into quite a few of my stories. And I think at some point during this little walk through the park, I might have seen a stick or something poking out of the ground. It could have been a tree root or something. But that, I think, was the starting point of the story, because the very opening scene of the novel, Imogen finds this stick kind of sticking out of the ground. And it could be just, as I say, a tree root, but it could also be a bone. Possibly even the bone of a child. And I guess Ben's paranoid mind, and maybe mine as well, started turning towards that direction. And that was the beginning. And the first 25,000 words was just, I wrote them so quickly, and it just sort of poured out of me. And then I kind of hit a roadblock in the plot, because I had this idea for the ending, and I did a bit of research, and I realized that it just didn't work. And so essentially I did what I sometimes do with novels, and I just put it aside. And that was, as I say, about 6 years ago. And then over the second COVID lockdown last winter, I picked it up again. And I sort of, I read it again, and I suddenly saw how I could fix this problem with the plot. And I just wrote it again in a complete state of mind where it all just came out very quickly, and there was no problem with the writing at all. So yes, I wrote it in these two very quick bursts, which kind of suits the atmosphere of the novel, which is quite tense. And he's feeling stressed, and I was sort of feeling stressed that I wanted to just write this thing. And so there was a kind of a synergy there. But there was also a slight problem, because the whole novel is set in this kind of heat wave. And when I first had the idea, it was summer, and I wrote it in the heat of summer. But in the second writing phase, it was winter. So I had to sort of a bit of a leap of imagination to try and imagine what it felt like to be hot and kind of, and you know what I mean? But apart from that,
in the UK especially.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The climate isn't right really, but but we do have occasional real heat waves, like in 2018 and 2003, which both feature in the novel. So I was quite pleased that those dates worked out, because something happens in 2003, something happens in 2018, and that kind of accords with actual heat waves. So that was good.
Yeah, that coincides very well. I remember the 2018 summer, very nice and hot. Amazing. Yeah, sounds great. So what would you say made you want to start writing, or want to start writing a novel? Before all of this, way back.
Sure. I mean, I loved writing from a very young age. I think even before I started writing stories, I was telling myself stories. I used to play with sort of toy soldiers in the attic where we lived, and I was sort of telling myself stories while I was playing with the soldiers, and they sort of became characters. And then when I got a bit older and I outgrew that, I started doing almost like graphic novels. So I was sort of drawing pictures that was sort of narrative. And then when I was about 13 or 14, I sort of discovered the power of words and how words can create images in people's minds. And because my artistic skills were very, very limited, it was a very easy switch to go to writing stories. I started writing this unbelievably complex, epic science fiction odyssey when I was about maybe in my 20s, which got very overblown and didn't in the end lead anywhere. But it certainly got my appetite going for writing something, a longer work. And then my next attempt was a story about a guy who was murdered at the beginning, and then he kind of takes over the body of his own murderer. And it was quite a neat idea, and it had a really good twist at the end. So I was quite pleased with it, but I hadn't found my writing voice at that point, and it was kind of a bit overblown. I mean, some of my descriptions were, ridiculously long and so on. And I mean, it got rejected, but again, it was sort of part of my writing journey. And then my next attempt was I wrote a science fiction story set in the future where time itself becomes a kind of commodity that can be bought and sold, and the main character Raffi buys himself a year in this paradise-like place called the Chronosphere, where time moves very much more slowly. So and then of course there's a dark side to the Chronosphere, and that kind of becomes the sort of the story of the adventure. But Yeah, so that did okay. I sold that to a publisher, and I wrote 2 sequels to it, and that was really the beginning. That was
Amazing.
my first published novel,
Hmm.
and that was it was a young adult novel actually. It was sort of the characters were teenagers, and yeah, I sort of got I wrote a few more in that kind of mold. You know, a sort of a spooky story about a teenage detective who was sort of set in Victorian times, who like a sort of Sherlock Holmes, but he was like a ghost hunter, and that was quite fun. And then I wrote a story about flesh-eating shadows, which was kind of really quite scary, which appeals to that sort of horror, my love of horror. So yeah, I've written various things, but I guess because I suppose I should say that I had a bit of an entree into the publishing industry because I worked as an editor for many years before I started writing professionally, and that sort of helped me sort of get, I guess, contacts in the industry. But because I've always sort of worked directly with publishers, I've never needed an agent, and as a result, I probably haven't managed to sort of crack that the next stage, which is to get published by the top publishers, and you know, with all the kind of resources that they have. But you know, it's amazing how you can kind of make a living. I also write a lot of nonfiction. That's kind of my bread and butter work. Sort of writing, you know, at this level, and yeah, I mean that's kind of, I probably I sort of gone on a bit as before, but you know, that is essentially how I got started in writing novels.
No, it's really interesting to see sort of the progression from editor into writing, and maybe some of the maybe the insights or things you learned from that. So like you said, you've got a vast array of writing experience. So within that experience, what do you think is the biggest challenge you faced as a writer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've been very fortunate that I've never struggled for ideas. I've never had writer's block, as they call it. I tend to sort of have almost too many ideas, and part of my problem, I guess, has been to find the time amidst all my other work to actually write these ideas out. I've got a whole file of story ideas which I've never even started. I've got others which I've started and are kind of abandoned. That's my other issue, is that, you know, I find that the first wave passion I get at the beginning of a story carries me forward for sort of several chapters and maybe quite a few thousand words. But then when I sort of hit my first, if you like, obstacle in the plot or something which I'm sort of struggling with, I am sometimes quite tempted to abandon it because I don't think I have that perseverance sometimes to sort of persist with it, and as a result, I've got like a whole load of sort of half-written novels, which you know, at some point I'd like to go back to because some of them are quite good. But yeah, that's one issue I face. Another thing I've found more recently is sort of concentration. I find that I get sort of sidetracked by social media, or I might go down some rabbit hole with my research, and it's sort of quite hard to sort of, you know, think, look, this is my writing time. This is my time to actually get words down on paper. And, you know, sometimes I fritter it away, and that's a bit frustrating. It could be it could be just getting older. Maybe I just don't quite have that sort of concentration levels. I don't know, but that has been a bit of an issue lately.
No, I think it's definitely so easy to get sidetracked with all the various